Good morning, everyone. Pastor Shane here. As you can tell, I've changed the name of these from daily devotionals to semi-daily devotionals. I try to do them every day, but sometimes things come up and I just simply forget to make a video. It's not that I don't read them, it's just I forget to make a video about it. So here we are. Today is from Matthew, and this one's a tough one. Well, it's not tough, but it can be. It's one of those readings that can be tough. I'm actually going to read the whole thing because of that. It's Matthew 18, 23 through 35, the parable of the unforgiving servant. So that's 18, 23. So Jesus says, if you want to understand the kingdom of heaven, think about a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. Just as the king began to get his accounts in order, his assistants called his attention to a slave who had owed a huge sum to him, what a laborer might make in 500 lifetimes. The slave, maybe an embezzler, had no way to make restitution, so the king ordered that he, his wife, their children, and everything the family owned be sold on the auction block. The proceeds from the slave sale would go toward paying back the king. Upon hearing this judgment, the slave fell down, prostrated himself before the king, and begged for mercy. Have mercy on me, and I will somehow pay you everything. The king was moved by the pathos of the situation, and so indeed he took pity on the servant, told him to stand up, and then forgave the debt. But the slave went and found a friend, another slave, who owed him about 100 days' wages. Pay me back that money, shouted the slave, throttling his friend and shaking him with threats and violence. The slave's friend fell down prostrate and begged for mercy. Have mercy on me, and I will somehow pay you everything. But the first slave cackled and was hard-hearted and refused to hear his friend's plea. He found a magistrate and had his friend thrown into prison, where he said, "You will sit until you can pay me back." The other servants saw what was going on. They were upset, so they went to the king and told him everything that had happened. The king summoned the slave, the one who had owed him so much money, the one whose debt the king had forgiven, and the king was livid. "You slovenly scum," he said, seething with anger. "You begged me to forgive your debt, and I did. What would be the faithful response to such latitude and generosity? Surely you should have shown the same charity to a friend who is in your debt." The king turned over the unmerciful slave to his brigade of torturers, and they had their way with him until he should pay his whole debt. And that is what my Father in heaven will do to you unless you forgive each of your brothers and each of your sisters from the very cockles of your heart. Whew. There's so much going on in that passage that it's really tough to read. I mean, I know this is a devotional and I'm not supposed to dig deep down into some of this stuff, but I'm going to just simply because this is one of those passages that gets used in so many ways. It's hard to read from, especially for me for today, just like all the slave and king talk and all that. It's not something that resonates with me, and it has a really different connotation for Americans, But you can set that aside and say, that the people listening to Jesus would have understood all of that, and that's fine. But a lot of people use this passage, especially the end part, 34 and 35, where the king turns over the unmerciful slave to torturers as a proof texting for the idea of hell, that God will send people to hell. And that is a way to look at it. You can look at it that way as a metaphor for that. And though I would say if you do it that way, then you have to really read into that and say that, at least here, the idea of the giving is that it's not eternal torment forever with no possibility of retribution. It says that they had their way until you should pay the whole debt. So anyway, I don't view it that way, at least not in an afterlife sort of heaven and hell sort of way. I look at this as a passage that talks about the real-time consequences of not extending grace. And I think that is where the devotion is getting at today. Over on Clergy Matters, let me pull that back up. It reads very short. It says, God's generosity knows no bounds. God gives us grace upon grace, incomprehensible, transformative love, and unending forgiveness, not because we're so wonderful and we've earned it, but because God sees us as wonderful enough, or wonderful even though we can't earn it. Then why, oh why, can't we extend the same grace, love, and forgiveness to others? Why, when God wipes away our every debt, do we turn around and try to get back at others who have wronged us, as if those folks aren't just as wonderful in God's eyes? I believe that this passage really works best when we understand that treating people poorly, not extending grace to people, has real time consequences, and that in our free will, our ability to choose how we behave, we will reap the consequences of those. And so you can say, that we're that we will be tortured in real time through broken relationships, through the exile that is, the ostracization. Ooh, there's a good word for you. When you've been extended grace, when somebody has forgiven you or done something good for you, and then you turn around and treat people like crap, that is going to follow you. It is really hard to shake that off, to get rid of that stigma. And the more you do that, the more your heart is in that way, the more you're going to be identified as a careless, mean, graceless person, and then people will start to interact with you in those ways. And that isolation is all encompassing in terms of how this passage works out. So, you could talk about an afterlife hell that you'll be sent to, and that is a way to look at it, but I prefer to look at it as the real-time consequences, the real-life hell of choosing to not be God, or choosing not to be like God. Good Lord. In this way, choosing not to extend grace. So, this is one of those passages. It's really deep, and there's so many ways to look at it and so much depth to it. I love it. I'm glad that this was today's devotion. Pray with me this simple, short prayer. Merciful God, help me to see others as you do and extend the same grace to them as you do to me. Amen. Hope your day goes well. That is my prayer for you today. I hope your day goes well. If you're one of my friends that is struggling, I pray that struggle ends. And if there's any way that I can help reduce some of that struggle, please let me know. Please let me know. I love you all. See you again tomorrow.